Priti Patel, Shadow Foreign Secretary.
I commend my right honourable friend for securing this really important, urgent question. Today, Jimmy Lai and the democracy and freedom he has campaigned for in Hong Kong has been sentenced to 20 years. As his son Sebastian has said, Jimmy dedicated his life to defending the freedoms of Hong Kong. For that heroism, he's being punished. He's essentially getting a death sentence for that. Jimmy is a hero and deserves to be back home with his family, not hauled in chains before the courts languishing in a prison cell. We call for his release. The fact that Jimmy Lai has been sentenced to 20 years, the longest sentence ever under the national security law, is not only a reflection of the cruelty inflicted by the Chinese Communist Party, but it's a monumental diplomatic failure of this feeble and gullible Prime Minister. Just over a week ago, he was with President Xi defending engagement with the CCP. He gave China permission for their super embassy spy hub, but failed to secure Jimmy's release. So can the Minister have some backbone now and tell us exactly what details were discussed between the Prime Minister and Xi? Did he call for Jimmy to come back home? Did he demand access to the healthcare he needs? The official readout of the meeting published from Downing Street on the website didn't even mention Jimmy Lai's name. So we need answers, Mr. Speaker. Jimmy's family and the whole country want to know when will this weak and pathetic Labour government finally stand up to China and show some backbone? And will the Foreign Secretary actually do something, such as summon the Chinese ambassador and prepare a list of diplomats to expel in response to China's refusal to free Jimmy Lai? Will the government revoke the planning permission granted for this embassy, the super embassy spy hub? Will China now be placed on the enhanced tier of furs at long last? And will the UK, holding the presidency of the UN Security Council, actually take some steps now and ask what diplomatic steps will be taken to escalate this case, put some pressure on China for once, and secure global support for Jimmy's release? Jimmy must be freed now. And I have to say, this is a day of shame for this weak Labour government and its failure to stand up for China.
Let me thank the Shadow Foreign Secretary for her comments, but to also say that she will know that this is a situation that has been ongoing before we were in government, and that we continue to seek the release of Jimmy Lai immediately. She will know that we assess Jimmy Lai's prosecution to be politically motivated. And she will know that in order to have the conversation with the Chinese government, you need to be in the same room. That's why the Prime Minister raised this on his visit, and we continue to raise this at every level of government and at every opportunity to do so. The Right Honourable Lady will also know that on the instruction of the Foreign Secretary, the British Consul General also attended the sentencing, and that we continue to keep in regular touch with the family. She will also know that we continue to do all that we can, publicly and privately, to secure the release of Jimmy Lai. And that is what we will continue to do so.
I'm grateful for you granting this. Today, as the Minister said, Jimmy Lai, a British citizen, has been in prison for a further 20 years. Now, given his poor health and the fact that he sat for 5 years in solitary confinement, this is not a sentence, it is a death sentence on this brave man. They've trashed everything that we would consider reasonable in law. I, for example, as others, I was named 9 times in this prosecution case, and I've never even met him, or sadly, ever even spoken to him. I ask the question simply of the Minister. Why does the UK government statement they released today refer to Jimmy Lai as a British national? Lord Cameron finally changed that and made it clear that he was a British citizen. Yes. Can she not now say that she will now change that and call him a British citizen, which is what he is? And why does this constantly now refer me to Hong Kong and to the national security law? But the reality is that the British government has sanctioned absolutely nobody in the Chinese government for trashing the Sino-British agreement and now installing the Chinese national security law, which is the reason why Jimmy Lai has been arrested. And he has been convicted and sentenced for nothing more than standing up for freedom of speech and peaceful protesting for democracy. So I asked the Minister as well, Mr. Speaker. The government went on a visit to China recently, and they before that granted full planning permission for this huge and ghastly Chinese embassy in London. At least, I say to the Minister, surely, why did they not hold back, if that's what they want to do, on that planning permission? So say to the Chinese government, you must release Jimmy Lai now and cut and cancel this prosecution altogether. Otherwise, you will not get your Chinese embassy, instead of which we've given it to them free and for nothing, and the Prime Minister was treated like dirt while he was out there. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that Sebastian Lai and Claire Lai, children of Jimmy Lai, have fought for him, and I feel sorry for them, and my thoughts go to them. But surely, that indeed a sad day for anybody that believes in freedom, justice, the legitimate rule of democratic-made law, and now will the government call for a humanitarian parole.
Minister.
I thank the Right Honourable Member for his question. He may have missed my reference in my opening remarks to Jimmy Lai being a British citizen, but perhaps I can reiterate that again. And it is important to reiterate what also we have said today, which is that we call on the Hong Kong authorities to release Jimmy Lai immediately on humanitarian grounds so that he may be reunited with his family and for him to be receiving all the necessary medical treatment and for full access to independent medical professionals. The Right Honourable Member will also know that the Prime Minister raised Jimmy Lai's case with President Xi on the 29th of January in Beijing. And since the visit, the Foreign Secretary has been in contact with Mr Lai's family. The FCDO are also in close contact with Mr Lai's international legal team, Doughty Street Chambers, and his son and daughter, Sebastian and Claire. And the Foreign Secretary last met with Sebastian and Claire on the 8th of January. In relation to the Chinese embassy, national security is our first duty. The planning decision was taken independently by the Secretary of State for Housing, the conclusion of a process that he may remember began in 2018, when the then Foreign Secretary provided formal diplomatic consent for the plans. But it is also important to be saying today that we stand with the people of Hong Kong, and we will always honour the historic commitments made under the legally binding Sino-British Joint Declaration, and China must do the same.
Tom Tugendar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, many of us in this House were sanctioned by China, and the Prime Minister went over and managed to sell somehow the partial unsanctioning of a few of us as a victory. I would have welcomed a victory, which would have been the release of Jimmy Lai. But sadly, the Prime Minister conceded all of his cards before getting on the plane, leaving himself nothing to negotiate. Couldn't the Minister find anything else that maybe China wants that he could negotiate with? Maybe the Prime Minister could offer them the Isle of Wight or perhaps the Outer Hebrides. He's trying to give away everything else anyway, and at least the job of the Prime Minister would then be to protect a British citizen, and one who, as we all recognise, has now been given a death sentence by the Chinese, not the Hong Kong authorities.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps I can answer the substance of that question with a more serious response, which is that it was important to see progress that was made on lifting the ban of parliamentarians to be free to travel to China. And what the Prime Minister said last week is absolutely right. that there is more to do, and it is important to get clarity on how we move forward, where those bans have not been lifted, and it is very important that we continue to see that progress.